going to be talking about my approaches to editing, and basically when I'm editing, or rather when I'm actually shooting, is my goal is to always get it right in camera so that I'm not having to do too much editing afterwards. But there are times, such as this particular occasion, where I don't have much of a choice but to do a fair amount of editing. I'm actually currently working on my 27-inch Wacom Cintiq tablet, but you're actually looking at my ASO monitor, which is the color calibrated monitor. You're therefore seeing the correct color calibration. So in other words, it's the best screen to be looking at this at. So a few of the things that I'll be looking at is I'll be looking at these shadows, and the reason that these shadows actually occurred is because I'll circle them just in case they're not that obvious. But the reason that these shadows actually occurred is because of the time that these images were taken at. Now ideally, if we're doing a on location session, the best time to be doing it at is preferably around the time of golden hour, and that really depends on the time in summer of when we're shooting. So if it's a really harsh contrasty summer, and if the weather's really hot and we're having long days, then it's even better to start shooting between 5 and 6 and onwards, because what you want is you want it when the sun's going to be quite low and it's going to be really soft and gentle and spread that light evenly, as opposed to shooting during the middle of the day when the sun's really contrasty, and that's when you're going to get these shadows. We had tried to actually miss this time of the day, but unfortunately we started a little bit late. We were aiming to start between 8 and 10, but we started a little bit later, and I think this was probably around about 9:30, and even at 9:30 in the morning, this was in Vilnius, Lithuania, the sun was already starting to be quite harsh, and so there's a few of the things that I'll be looking at in editing this image, which is basically trying to get out some of that shadow. So, and there's a few other specs around here that I'll just basically take care of, which is nice and easy to do. Just to clean up the image a little bit more. Now I'm going to be making a new layer and starting to clean out some of this shadow down below. Because in this case, sometimes the hope is that the highlights and shadows will work together in a way where it's complementary, but unfortunately in this case, what it's resulted in is that the highlights and the shadows are clashing with each other, and therefore making her face look badly exposed. And you know, for a baby, it's almost like she was already aware or had an innate knowledge of what to do for the camera, and she just sat there smiling at me like that. So it's fantastic when babies sometimes do that. I'm not going to finish that image, but I was just giving a few examples of the way that I would approach that image. So you'll see how that evens out all the shadows there, and it's not as much of a harsh contrast. And I'll be doing the same on the steps also to take out that shadow. In the next image, what I'll be looking at is, you will see that the wind has unfortunately made this girl's hair extremely messy, and the normal method of correcting that would be simply to do cloning, would be simply to clone around the area. But the trouble with that, many people don't realise that Photoshop doesn't see what is shown here. Photoshop doesn't see that there's a beautiful girl standing here and that this is hair and that these are flowers and these are her dress. Photoshop sees things in terms of pixels. So in order for me, the purpose of cloning is cloning, in other words, making an exact replica of one area to another. Now, the problem with doing that is because Photoshop is very pixelated, if I kept on taking it from the same image, putting pixels on top of each other, it's simply going to make it look blurry. And this is obviously an extremely, this area here is obviously all a textured surface, and therefore I need to make sure that that texture of that surface is what I'm actually cloning. So instead of just taking it from around, I make sure that I go into other areas where the texture is still present so that I can bring back. This is an area that, because it's a repeating texture, it means that I can do this, but it will also just bring back that texture so that it's not going to be blurry. So that's just a couple of examples. Again, I'm not going to finish that image, but that's just a couple of examples of how I go about my editing workflow in order to ensure that I'm working as non-destructively as possible. Again, you will see in this girl's face that because of the harsh contrast of the sun and the harsh nature of the sun, you'll see that there's harsh highlight here and there's harsh shadow here. Here it's very flat on the left side of her face, and here it's just simply overexposed. So there's some adjustments that I'll be needing to make there in order to make sure that it's going to look as neat as I can possibly get it to be. Thanks for watching.